taught how to have actual Bible studies with people. And so this is not only good for your ministry preparation and your ministerial preparation, but it's also very poignant towards this idea of evangelism. Let me see if I can pull that up. But before we do that, we were looking at Matthew chapter 26. Matthew chapter 26 was what we were looking at on as our text for this week. And again, to me, this is just a brilliant text as it looks at the Gethsemane experience of Christ. And as we continue to build out the concept of prayer and what prayer is, we looked at Matthew 26. If you have written something or if you have put something together, I would love to hear it. And we want to try to share our thoughts just like on last week. And collaboratively talk about this text before we go into our other parts. So if anybody wants to share, they can just unmute themselves and they can share, and we would love to hear that. Turn this way. Well, don't make me wait forever.
All right. I was trying. Okay. Prayer is not always where God changes the situation first. Sometimes prayer is where God changes me enough to walk through it obediently, faithfully. The honest tension with this text is, what do I do when the thing I prayed would leave stays? This is why Gethsemane speaks deeply to me. When Jesus fell on his face and prayed, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. I have learned, and I am still learning, that prayer is not pretending to be strong. Amen to glory. Prayer is bringing my real heart before a real Father. Jesus prayed, and the cup still did not pass. And I am comforted because this changes how I see prayer. Unanswered prayer is not always unheard prayer. Sometimes God does not remove the burden immediately because he's doing something deeper through surrender and trust and obedience. The word nevertheless grips me the most, because nevertheless is where my will collides with God's will. It's where prayer becomes more than asking God to change things for me. And prayer becomes trusting God even when things do not change quickly. I have learned, and I'm still learning, some of the deepest prayers are not, Lord, get me out. Sometimes the deepest prayers become, Lord, strengthen me to walk through faithfully, obediently. Jesus walked into Gethsemane overwhelmed, but he walked out surrendered. The cross was still ahead, the pain was still real, but prayer aligned his heart with his Father. And what if this is the greatest lesson this text teaches me, that real prayer is where honesty and surrender meet. It's where I can say, Lord, this hurts, while still saying or even whispering, nevertheless.
Amen. Very good job. Very good job. Dante, you got any comments for us? No? Yes?
Yeah, I thought that was very well, not only very well said, but just I want to say more personal and I can't put the words together, but it was definitely just a great insight on analyzing what it would mean for someone reading it and striving to apply it personally. I think that was great.
Neil, and you wrote this manuscript?
Yes, sir. You know, I'm dealing, I had no idea. I woke up early this morning. It's been a little busy around here. And I said, I'm going to do the homework because, I don't want to come to class without having looked at the assignment. And it really kind of resonated with me because, it's real. I've had to revisit some of my prayers, and deal with some situations that I'm dealing with currently, and just weighing all of that. Actually, I did it twice, but I didn't want to be long. Boom shakalaka. I don't know if that helps you or what, but it was a live thing, kind of, so to speak.
And a lot of times, again, the exercises are whether you don't have to always spend 15 hours on it. It doesn't always take a long time. It's just the idea of getting the discipline to write. And one of the things that I've learned, or one of the things that I am learning, is that when you write this way, especially when we're writing topically, for me, the reward is that it keeps me from overthinking a text to the point where I'm not able to just execute a very simple, direct commentary or statement on a text, if that makes any sense. It strips away all of the academic elocution, and it just allows you to be as pure as you possibly are going to be in that writing experience. So it's one of the reasons why I gave us this task. It's to help all of us, one, strengthen our writing ability, two, try to overcome maybe some learned procrastination in our ministry, and three, to get us to be more spontaneous in our being able to create messages and studies without having to put so much labored thought into it, that it's actually a more free-flowing occurrent process. All right, Dante, do you have something for us today?
I do, but I didn't manuscript it the way I don't know how I could. Let me see.
That's fine. You can still give us your thoughts. You still got a brain. We want to listen to your brain.
Hold on, let me find it. I didn't even put it in my notes right yet. Hold on 1 second. Just give me a minute. If you got something, you can go ahead. I'll have mine up in just a second.
Yeah, I'll read the short blurb that I wrote from mine. And I just wrote a paragraph. And it was the beginning of a thought of what I thought Matthew 26, what resonated with me from Matthew 26. And I'll put it up so that everybody can see. It's going to be, let me see if I can do this very quickly without totally embarrassing myself. Let me just do a quick. There we go. And I will put this up for you. And I love what Neil just wrote because it was very personable. And I wrote something, again, what I wrote was something very different. But it was how I was looking at it. Let me put it up now. Can y'all see that? Can y'all see this?
Yeah.
Okay. And I'll boldface it so you can see it. My title is how do you talk is what it should say. How do you talk to an angry father? And it says, what do you do when the heart is heavy and you are emotionally stressed to the point where it begins to affect you physically? How do you cope and deal with emotional grief that is caused by not wanting to experience, for the first time ever in your life, being the direct object of your parents' anger? I don't think that I've ever looked at this text this way, because as a rebellious child who sometimes vacillates in and out of the presence and intimacy of God, I cannot say that I have ever been in a state like in the garden, where the prayer, the pleading 3 times, is coming from someone who has never been the direct object of God's anger. Having always been in the eternal presence of God and always enjoying his unconditional love to the fullest extreme, it is for the first time in his existence since eternity past, he is in the direct impact of his dad's anger, something he has never experienced before. How do you cope with dealing with your dad being mad at you for the first time ever? And I want to suggest to you that we learn to fall on our face and bow to our knees. I might actually preach that. That's actually better than I thought.
And that was good. very definitely practical. As far as like from a family perspective of, you know, talking to a father. So it's a whole lot of connection there.
Yeah, and again, in that message, I'm not looking to in that position that I positioned that text in. Personable is definitely something I was looking for, but I think what I was looking for was that I inverted the text.
Yes, you did.
If I could tell you what I did, I inverted the text and put the text into a position of conflicting thought, because oftentimes it's easy to kind of say what the text is doing as it. I think sometimes we're explaining a text. We might do it in various ways, but we're explaining the text. But in inverting the text and now posing this question for, and I can't say that I've actually regarded it this way, that he has only been the watcher of God's wrath and anger. He has been a participant, a watcher, only from a third person perspective. This is a very unusual situation, because he is about to taste for the first time. I mean, I can't put that into words. I can't really comprehend that, because he has never in the existence of God. And we have to assume that God has always existed. And in that relationship with the ever-present, ever-existing God, the Son, the second part of the God deity, has never in his existence experienced the wrath of God, even though he, as God, has distributed it, dispersed it, seen it. But it's a different situation when you're at the tip of the spear. I think I'm actually going to preach that. I can't believe that. And again, I'm trying to get into a place where I'm not being so academic with the text. And I actually think that was for me, these exercises have helped me to kind of get out of my scholasticism but the first impulse is what I'm writing. I've already got the tools. I just need to trust the tools as I write.
At God, or how did you arrive at a father being angry?
Because
I guess that's the text, inverting the text. Is that?
Yeah, but because when I looked at Matthew 26, and of course, I'm always asking. Sometimes I ask it too much, but I'm always asking, what do we know in the text that we have not looked at? But this verse 38 is what kind of got me there. My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch with me. And then he goes a little further, falls on his face, and he prays, verse 39, my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. And I asked the question, even though I thought I kind of knew what it was, I asked the question about verse 39, what is he so sorrowful about? What is causing the grief? And of course, I've heard tons of sermons, so I know that the cup is not related to, which I think is very interesting. The cup is not related to the death. He had already decided to die. So he's not telling God to spare him from death. He's asking God, and then also I'm taking out the word God for the first time, because he never really says that, does he? He never says that in this text. In verse 39, what he says is Father, Daddy, I don't want to experience the anger you have with your other children. That's really what brought me to that point of and again, this is the English Standard Version that I'm reading from here. But he asked, that's the question he asked God. And he asked God that 3 times. And it's not that he's saying, God, take the death from me. He is an obedient son. You and I are not like what we are seeing here. Christ is an obedient steward. He is an obedient son, and he is already committed. Again, at the point where Christ was wrapped in human flesh and came into the earth, he had already submitted himself to the death. But it is what the death has implied into it that he's grieving. That's what has him sorrowful. And he's so sorrowful, the text says that he was sorrowful even to death, that he had emotional stress that brought on a physicalized burden, and it was related to his relationship. It wasn't related to death. He doesn't want to experience the anger of God, having sat in the love of God his entire life. And that changed my perspective on that, because I don't think I ever read it with that veracity implied, that this is a son talking to his father. If there's any way that he will not, and I get, when I put it that way, Neil, it made sense. And I've, in my personal life, as we've dealt with these concepts of prayer, I have moved God to my living room, in my home when I was a child, and in the place of where my actual father used to sit and talk with me, I've put God there so that I could talk with him more. And in that regard, I remember how it used to feel when my daddy was angry at me. I remember how it made me feel, but I don't ever believe that I have felt that way towards God. Mm-hmm. I don't believe, and we're talking about sorrowfulness. So that was really the programming that led me to that state, to that question. What do you do when your daddy's angry at you? And again, for some people, that's going to be very hard to put their mind around, because they have a disjointed relationship with their father. So then to say that really does hit home, because many of us, those of us who've been grafted into the Commonwealth, we don't know what it's like to be in God's presence always. We haven't lived that way. We've lived outside of his presence. And so that would be a very hurtful moment in their life. Again, I can imagine, I'll be honest. I remember the first time with both of my children that I had to be a father with both of them. I remember their reaction when I had to be a disciplinarian. And I remember how their faces contorted because they had never seen that side of me before. Wow, this is great. I think I'm going to preach that in Colorado. That was perfect. But it was, that would probably be the most, again, that was why I thought about it that way. Verses 38 and 39 really just kind of, I've never saw it as that way. That's what his grief and sorrowfulness is, that brings about this physical distress. That's crazy. I mean, I've never thought, I mean, I've always had it on the opposite end, where it was out of fear, because my dad was coming home and I had done something wrong and I knew I was about to get a beating. This has nothing to do with anything that he's done wrong. So it takes all of that out the way. And it shows the relationship that Christ and the Father have. It shows the very interpersonal relationship that he had, that he was sorry and emotionally distraught that he was going to have to feel this, experience this. It's so incredible, because it has nothing to do with the actual death and the physical pain on that cross. In his mind, the greatest thing he's going to experience, the more hurtful thing he will experience, is not the death, it is his Father's wrath. That is crazy. I'm gonna write it down.
Yeah.
I'm glad I'm recording so they can record all of that, write it down. I'm going to definitely preach that in Colorado. That is just beautiful.
I was thinking about preaching this behind Can My Praise Survive My Pain?
Right. Yeah. That's how I got to it. And my natural disposition is to try to find a place where I can turn the text on its head. Marcus Cosby talks about when he was at seminary, his doctoral teacher used to tell him to keep turning and turning a text. We've heard all of these texts are purple passages. We've heard them tons of times. So you have to keep turning the text and turning the text and turning the text and looking at the text and looking at the text until you find what is uniquely not being shared in a way. And I think that position might be a very unexplored position.
That's interesting. I'm just getting to where I want to I want to interpret the text with some real integrity.
Amen.
Yeah.
Dante.
Okay. I'll just read what I wrote. I had a couple kinetic questions, but I read the first one and then just kind of go through. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
So,
what do you do when the pressures of life becomes heavier than your own strength? Because everybody eventually enters a Gethsemane moment, a place where emotions are heavy, decisions are costly, suffering feels near, and answers do not come quickly. Some people run, some people hide, some people numb themselves, and some people collapse internally. But Jesus prayed. In Matthew 26, teaches us that prayer is not merely a religious routine, but prayer is the place where surrender, strength, and trust are formed under pressure. The big idea is prayer is not escaping the pressures of life. Prayer is where God sustains us through the pressure of life. So prayer is the place where we bring real pain to God. He said, "My soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even unto death." Jesus does not hide his anguish. The Greek language here speaks of overwhelming distress and crushing sorrow. This is not shallow emotion. This is soul-level agony. And yet Jesus does not isolate himself from the Father. He moves toward the Father in prayer. Let's see. Okay. Prayer is also the place where we stay spiritually awake. He said, "Stay here and watch with me." The word watch means stay alert, stay awake, stay spiritually attentive. Jesus understood that spiritual battles require spiritual awareness. The disciples slept while Jesus prayed. That contrast is powerful. One group treated the moment casually, but Jesus recognized the seriousness of the hour. Okay, hold on here. There's a connection here culturally. We live in a distracted generation. People constantly are scrolling on their phones, but pray rarely. We have endless entertainment, but little spiritual attentiveness. Yet Jesus says, "Watch with me." Yeah, prayer trains the heart to stay awake in a sleeping world. Third point here is prayer is the place where we surrender our will. Oh, my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. This is one of the holiest moments. Jesus is not rebelling against the Father. He is expressing the real horror of the coming cross. The cup in the Old Testament symbolized divine wrath and judgment. Jesus knows he is about to bear sin, yet he's not scared of death. And yet, after expressing his desire, he surrenders completely. Nevertheless, the word changes the entire prayer. Prayer is also a place where strength is given for the assignment. Luke's account says angels strengthened Jesus. Notice the Father did not remove the cross. He strengthened the Son for the cross. That's important. Sometimes prayer changes the circumstances. Sometimes prayer changes us within the circumstances. Many believers pray, Lord, get me out. But sometimes God says, I'll carry you through. And there's a biblical pattern throughout scripture that Paul gives. I didn't get deep into that. And then I see prayer doing three things here in Gethsemane. Prayer reveals the heart. Prayer reshapes the will, and prayer releases strength. What does that teach us about prayer? To pray honestly, stop performing before God. Prayer also, another thing we learn is prayer consistently. We need to pray consistently. We need to pray consistently. Jesus prayed before the crisis explode publicly. We should also pray watchfully, stay spiritually awake, pray surrenderingly, trust God's will over our own understanding, pray persistently. Even Jesus prayed repeatedly in Gethsemane. This passage is not merely telling us to pray harder. It is showing us the Savior who prayed perfectly on our behalf. Where Adam failed in the garden, Jesus obeyed in the garden. Where humanity rebelled, Christ surrendered. He drank the cup of wrath so believers would receive the cup of grace. He his prayer led him to the cross. The cross led to resurrection, and the resurrection gives believers access to the Father in prayer. And then I had this final kinetic question. What do you do when the pressures of life becomes heavier than your own strength? Well, it's the same question. You do what Jesus did. Fall before the Father, pray honestly, surrender completely, and trust God faithfully. Because prayer may not always change the assignment, but prayer will sustain us through it. The temptation is to panic, to isolate, or to give up. But Jesus shows us another way. Pray, not under pressure, but pray in the pressure.
Neil, you got any comments? Great job. Well, that didn't sound like if that was all you wrote the whole sermon, brother.
Yeah,
that was good.
I was writing a lot of points. It was a lot going through the mind with the tools we got, and so I wasn't able to put it in the order and take some stuff out and just stay focused on one thing. So I just kind of, I didn't have time to do it. I was going to do it.
But even brainstorming like that, if you were to go back a month from now and go back to those notes, you could give yourself a good head start in grafting a new message from. So it's not necessarily that you have to have a fully formed or fully polished presentation. I actually think that's why people feel scared to come to class sometimes, because they feel like they have to have something already together. But that's not the point. The point is to continue, is that there's an internal part of you, of all of us, that go, I wanted to come prepared with something fully formed. But this class is to exercise that deficiency to grow. So it's going to be sometimes one paragraph or notes, or it's just about getting into the habit and the process. So even those notes that you just shared with us, if you went back a month from now, you could create and graft a sermon, several sermons, different topics even from that information. So that was still a healthy exercise for you.
I still remember the first text you assigned. But yes, I thought that was a very thorough expose. I agree with Mike that, you know, you can preach 2 or 3 sermons. You have sufficient there to preach 2 or 3 sermons. And you gave the titles, or the basic titles, at the close. I think you mentioned surrender, trust, and obedience. Boom. Those are the 3 points that, boom shakalaka.
Let me ask a question. Oh, go ahead, Neil.
Go ahead.
No, you can finish. Okay.
What was I going to say? Yeah, the primary thought that you can pray deeply, sincerely, and still come away with the nevertheless. I thought the comfort that I got in the text, you highlighted it as well. And so I'm just making mention because it appeals to, it deals with, it addresses approaching the text with real integrity. I gotta confess, that's a real strong point for me in these days as a result of this class. Boom shakalaka. And I can see how the topical approach far exceeds the expository approach. And that kind of came out in your notes.
Let me ask you a question, Dante, and then I'm asking the same thing for Neil, so Neil, you can prepare. Can you do me a favor and just look at the bottom conclusionary statements that you made? And my question that I want you to try to work, if we can work out right now in real time, is your presentation, if you were now making it into a homiletic, so you're moving it out of the hermeneutic into the homiletic, how would you make this message, and the same things for Neil, how would you turn that message gospel forward? In the text that I read, my writing, it was very gospel forward if you think about what you heard.
Well, the way you were doing Rob last week with the hooping and stuff. So I would there's some additions to add to lead to the gospel. You know, things that you could say, like somebody listening today is in a Gethsemane season. You know what I'm saying? And then kind of go into, you know, maybe you are emotionally overwhelmed, spiritually exhausted, mentally burdened. And the temptation is to panic or to give up. But Jesus showing you another way. And then I'll kind of have to lead into what actually happened on the cross.
Read your bottom statements though.
Bottom statements.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on here.
You made some conclusionary remarks.
You talking about after I asked the question again when I said, what do you do? What do you do when the pressure of life becomes heavier than your own strength? You do what Jesus did: fall before the Father, pray honestly, surrender completely, and trust God faithfully.
Now let's turn that outward.
Okay.
Here's why I say that. A lot of sermons ask people to have self-reflection. Watch this. But self-reflection doesn't always put a person at the cross.
Okay.
Because a person can become introspective, and that introspectiveness does not lead one to the conclusion of the gospel. So how would you turn it gospel forward, outward facing, to where it's not asking a question about how a person feels or how a person's life is, but you turn it gospel forward by asking the questions of what does this mean, as it is tied towards and pointing towards the gospel.
Okay.
In other words, we can easily default to saying Jesus. We need to look at Jesus. Jesus is the example. How do you change that from Jesus is the example to let's not only that Jesus is the example, but showing what Jesus, the way I'm trying to frame it is, how do you change that from Jesus as the example that we should follow, which is inward facing? Because how do I turn that to where he isn't just an example, but I can make it to where I see Jesus as the thing I need so that my life can be what you just said. Not that he's an example, but he's the thing I need. That's how you outward face it. Because if a person just goes, okay, well, I use Jesus as an example, then that's the same reason why people got "What would Jesus do" bracelets. But if you're trying to get someone to surrender, right, then Jesus has to be what I need, not the example. He has to be what I need. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So how outward face it for me? Turn that statement around and put it towards and rewrite it or rethink it to where it's outward facing. Does that make sense? Let's see if we can do that together. What if you can type that statement in from the question. What was the question again?
What do you do when the pressures of life become heavier than your own strength? And then I said, you do what Jesus did: fall before the Father, pray honestly, surrender completely, and trust God faithfully. Because prayer may not always change the assignment, but prayer will sustain you through it.
Now, again, I think that it's a great statement, but I think it's inward focused.
Okay, right.
If I was making this a homiletic, it's inward focused in that if I am a Christian, it basically told me what I should do. So Christians are shaking their head. To the non-converted, Jesus as an example is harder than Jesus as a necessary agent for. So what do you say to the person who does not have Christ and who is not saved? How would that change? And I think it does change.
I think that if we were to try to, well, I would probably, let me see.
Look at it's you got it right there in the question you asked.
Right.
It's in the question and the first statements afterwards. And you again.
So to the unbeliever, their response would be, come to the Father through Christ,
Okay.
Because they may be walking through the same moments that the believers are, but in their experience, they're not looking at all of that. They're looking at Christianity, as a whole. You know what I mean? They're looking at Christianity as about religion, about rules, church culture, and such like. But I would turn. Maybe that's what I could say. I don't know, but I do know that.
So read your statement to me again.
Okay. What do you do when the pressures of life become heavier than your own strength?
So let me ask you a question, and this will get you there. Was that what Jesus actually dealt with?
What, the pressures?
Exactly what your statement is.
Yeah.
Can you apply that directly to Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane? I want you to think about what you're asking, and that's how you're going to forward face it. Was that what you just said? What do you do when the pressures of life get so heavy? What does it say?
Heavier than your own strength.
Heavier than your own strength. Was that what happened in that garden? Did the pressure of life get heavier than Jesus' own strength? Just think about what you're saying. And that's why it will become, that's why it's inward facing. The moment you can think about it the other way, it's going to become outward facing. Because would you say that Jesus wasn't strong in that moment?
Not necessarily, but
why not?
I mean, yeah, humanly, yeah. Yeah. I would say he,
What part of sorrow and grief? I mean, again, I get what you're saying. I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm just saying that in order for it to become gospel focused, would you say that say your question to me one more time and then I'll flip it for you. Go ahead.
What do you do when the pressure of life becomes heavier than your own strength?
So the only time I need God is when the pressures of life become my own strength? Is the only time I need God when the pressures of life become too big for my own strength? Or does Christ show us complete dependency even when? Now the other statement is a little more forward facing because the other one disregards the unbeliever.
Mm-hmm.
The one I'm giving you regards the unbeliever, because the unbeliever believes that the only reason why most of us have God is in moments of crises.
Right. So basically what he's teaching us about trusting the Father is a good question to ask the unbeliever. What are you trusting to save you besides Christ?
Or write this down, Dante, because this will help with what you're writing. Is dependency dictated by circumstance?
Okay.
Do I have a circumstantial dependency?
Seems like that's how we learn. Anyway, seems like could it be that that's how we grow? When the circumstances arise, could it be that they arise to teach us dependency?
But my question to you is, was Jesus having to learn that?
He was practicing that. So,
well, I think of that passage where he learned obedience through the things that he suffered.
The circumstances.
And he was suffering.
I think that could work. But again, is that forward facing?
I'm feeling you. I'm getting there.
And the only reason I'm asking that is, does it help someone decide whether or not Jesus needs to be a part of their equation? It's not necessarily a right or wrong here, Dante or Neil. It's just something to push you to think about as you write it. As I was listening to it, what I was hearing was great advice.
Right. It was.
But if I move that to a hermeneutic, if I move that hermeneutic to a homiletic, there's nothing that rewards me with saying I need to come to Jesus.
Right.
So that's why I pushed your closing, and I'm emphasizing your closing statements rather than your full body of statements itself. The close of it seems to be very inward facing. If I heard that and I was sitting in the audience, it would tell me that what was written was directly designed to be instructional to believers. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm also trying to push everyone to a homiletic that is structured for unbelievers. So this is why when I said mine was, what does it feel like to have your daddy angry with you?
Mm-hmm.
I'm pointing outward. I'm not pointing inward, even though there might be some people that come and surrender themselves to confess because they've sinned against God. I'm pointing that outward, because where I'm going to ultimately show is that the greatest pain a human being, the greatest pain that a person can ever experience is the anger of their father. And how do you cope with the anger of a father? Knowing that the only way that it can be removed, the only way that the anger can be removed is that you're going to have to die for it. So I'm outward facing. Do you see that? That is outward facing. It's leading you to the cross. It, from the very beginning, is leading you to the cross. Okay. And so think on that real quick. Neil, let me hear your final statements, because I wrote it down for both when I was listening to
it. But prayer aligned his heart with his father. And maybe, or what if this is the greatest lesson that the text teaches me, that real prayer is where honesty and surrender meet. It's where I can say, Lord, this hurts, while still saying, nevertheless.
So the same question would be applied there. How would you make that gospel forward? Now, in this, what I'm asking is a very critical thinking exercise, because in and of itself, both of those topical hermeneutics that we did are outward facing. I'm just putting slight pressure to kind of, as I move it into the homiletic, a sermonic close, how would I then create the tension that's necessary to make someone who's not saved come to Jesus, as opposed to walk out the building and go, okay, I just need to better my relationship with God and just accept that some things are, his will. Because some people come to church who are not believers and they already believe they're saved. They don't think anything's wrong. How do you create the tension in that passage or in your script? How do you move over what you just talked to? How do you make tension so that unbeliever doesn't feel easy with just walking out and saying, if I just make those adjustments that he said, then clearly I'll be fine, right?
Yeah.
Same with you, Dante.
I think the I like well, I was blessed to arrive at the statement, real praise where honesty and surrender meet. And I've been on this word surrender for a minute.
Okay.
So I would probably, how about maybe what you're asking for, because I thought that was a power statement. Maybe what you're asking God to leave is staying, and as a result, you're carrying a heavy sorrow on the inside. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Maybe tonight is your night to surrender. Maybe today is your day to surrender. Maybe it's a call. Maybe this lesson is a call to have you experience surrender, in spite of the fact that whatever it is you're asking the Lord to take away, you're wanting now to look towards him, to respond to the call, that even if it stays, you're going to be obedient to his will. And what if his will is for you being here today, is for you to be obedient to the gospel?
And so that close is where the offer is made at the end. This is how a lot of sermons are written. They're written where the offer is presented at the end. What we would call the call to action is normally offered at the end. I'm saying, what if your call to action, your ask, your close begin well before that? In other words, when I say gospel forward, what it means is it's not just giving good advice or moral lessons, but it answers the question, how does this passage show me the need for a savior? How does it reveal the good news of what Jesus has done for me?
Well, I heard a comment that I wrote down in my spirit in the lieutenant's sermon. I was thinking of how I thought that was the point. How did he say that? He went to the cross so that we can experience grace. I don't remember exactly how we say that, but I remember that comment. And I thought that was whenever I do things like that, I try to kiss it with a verse like, we're saved by grace, boom, boom, boom. Ephesians 2:8. And that might be a beginning point, although that was not in my preview, but it resonated with me.
What was your beginning statements, Neil?
My beginning statements were prayer is not always where God changes the situation first. Sometimes prayer is where God changes me enough to walk through it faithfully, obediently.
Here's my question. For both of you, can you get to the cross? Do you think that you can manage getting to the cross when you think about the entire flow of your text? You know what? I'm gonna give an example. Maybe that's too different. Maybe that's not the right place. Does your big idea, will it move easily to the cross?
Yeah, when you acknowledge
I think, let me say this. Overall, both of those messages are centered around the gospel because they're centered around Jesus.
Right.
We're only talking about the homiletic presentation. What is the tension that you're going to bring? There's already dramatic tension homiletically. You're already going to bring dramatic tension. But I'm saying, through as you look over your script, does it talk to do you feel like that text, your script, talks to a believer or unbeliever more? What would you say the percentage is?
I would say believer. And now that you said the big idea, I went back to the big idea that I wrote, and it's a great segue to start transforming to the unchurched. My big idea was prayer is where surrender to the Father is formed under pressure. So at that point, I could make the switch and say, but the deeper gospel reality of Matthew 26 is this. And then I can go right into, Jesus is not only showing us how to pray, but he's showing sinners why they need a savior, so to speak.
Go back to say that part that you first said about surrender.
Prayer is where surrender to the Father is formed under pressure. And that goes back to what you were saying about circumstances and dependency. So it's like, yeah, that whole thing could be redone to formulate a whole line of thought toward the
because you could just base that sermon on the idea of surrender,
right? Because I could, from there I could say, what if the greatest problem in your life is not your circumstance, but your independence from God? So I mean, it's like, yeah, it's a lot there, man.
Or you could say what the greatest challenge might be. What if the greatest challenge for us is surrender? Again, I think the idea of surrender leads you better to a gospel focus, outward focus. What if you said prayer is the?
I said prayer is where surrender to the Father is formed under pressure.
And so you should already be able to find the greatest example where prayer was used by Jesus to surrender under pressure, right?
Yeah.
Where would you go?
Right here in Gethsemane.
I'm talking. No. We're building. We're trying to build We're trying to build a sermon now. We're trying to build some heat. What? Because you have to ultimately show the great example. You know, you see the example here. I mean, you could also make a run. You could put a run there,
Philippians
Dante.
2.
Oh, you grab Philippians 2, but I was thinking of somewhere else. You could do a run, Dante. The run is all the examples where Jesus used prayer as a mechanism of surrender. It all outward faces at that point. Because the ultimate place where Jesus used prayer as he dealt with surrender under pressure is when he yelled out, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" on the cross. And that was a prayer from Psalms.
Right.
So that would be the ultimate example of prayer. What was your statement? Prayer is
where a surrender to the Father is formed under pressure.
Well, right. That would be the ultimate example of that, correct?
Yes.
So that would then bookend what I'm writing. So once I've got the high point, that's what it is. The high point in the message would be the greatest example of this surrender. The opening point is what prayer is, and it's and not just about prayer, but that prayer is this moment to help us surrender under great pressure. So then that's the beginning, that's the end. We now need the filler, because the high point, if I've got, again, I'll read to you what my high point is for what I just wrote. The greatest pain Jesus experienced was not the crown of thorns that was pressed upon his head. Now, my high point is also a run. Everybody knows what a run is, right? Everybody know what a run is?
Mm-hmm.
Something that fattens or thickens or deepens the thought being expressed.
Okay, I like that, Neil. You should type that in the chat. That's a good definition. And the run, this run is to help celebrate. That's why I say your high point. This is going to help you celebrate. This is going to help everybody get off the ground together. So I say, the greatest pain Jesus experienced was not the crown of thorns that was placed upon his head, nor was the greatest pain the whips and 40 lashes that scourged his back, or the heavy cross he carried all the way up the hill called Golgotha. The greatest pain Jesus experienced was not even the nails driven through his hands or the nail that was fastened in his feet. My friends, the greatest pain my Lord and Savior, my God, experienced was having to endure the anger of his daddy, and all the pain in the world would never be enough to dull the pain of being the direct object of his father's anger for the first time. And he did all, and so that's my high point, right? You already heard my opening statement, but I got this high point where I'm really building towards how this all points to Jesus at Calvary, how this all points to Jesus and his resurrection, how it all points to Jesus coming into the world, how it all points to Jesus and what he's done for us, because that's the high point is the celebration where the plane takes off. And just so we can build this a little stronger, if you got to earn the high point, you have to earn it. There's nothing worse than a sermon that doesn't earn its high point. That point is where you want people excited. That's where you want people celebrating. That's where you want people applauding. That's where you want the unchurched person should be saying amen and clapping and praise the Lord. That not just members. Members are celebrating because it affirms their faith. Unconverted people are celebrating because they are finding their faith and learning about what makes God so great. That's why I said the question that really is posed there is why should what is my need for Jesus out of what you're saying? Why does anything you're saying tell me that I need Jesus? So the high point of your text is where for you is it's not saying that it's not only about prayer and showing that prayer was Jesus' method of surrendering to the pressure. Now, even after I said that, you might want to augment what you're saying, because immediately you see that it's not as outward facing. Your opening big idea isn't as outward facing as the idea of surrendering, not because of the pressure, but surrendering and submission as a sign of something of obedience. Or again, I think we're always saying that surrender in the face of persecution or surrender in the face of trial. But this is a unique experience, even though we're all saying that the Christological interpretation of this text is to help us understand the humanity of Jesus. The theological aspect really is in the book of Hebrews, where it says that the point of this text, even though Neil pointed out that in the garden, Neil, if you could grab that text for us.
What text?
Where you say he suffered and learned obedience.
Hebrews 2, verse 9. Hold on.
I'm going to show you a different thing that Hebrews said about that same text.
Well, it's okay. I'm here to learn, bro.
No, I'm not pointing it out as if it's some kind of grand thing. I'm just, don't get me wrong, brother. It's been in the Bible for a while.
Give me a minute. I have a small print thingamajigger here that I carry when I'm on the road. Hebrews 2. If I remember, it's verse 9. But we see Jesus.
I'm gonna go there real quick so everybody can see it. Can you see my screen?
That's not the verse. But we see Jesus made a little lower than the angels, who suffered so that he might taste. That's not.
Yeah,
the verse.
I think it's the text that I'm about to go to, which is Hebrews 5.
Might be. Verse what?
Well, I'm not going to the very same text that you're going, but I think it's in Hebrews 5.
And putting everything, Hebrews, I thought it was verse 2. It was chapter 2. Since the children, okay, maybe it's not.
I actually know what text you're talking about, but I'm not, I don't think it's Hebrews. I think you're thinking about Philippians 2:8.
No, it's not Philippians. It's Hebrews.
Okay.
Let me see.
Here was mine. I think we probably it is Hebrews 5, like I thought. Dante, if you look in, this is Hebrews 5, and for Niels, I'm going to read verse 8, which is the text he wants after it. But you can't. This is why I said you can't read 8 without understanding verse 7, because verse 7 is where is not dealing with it is dealing with the garden, but there's a different point that he's articulating when it comes to surrender. In the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplication with loud cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death, and he was heard because of his reverence. In Hebrews, they are arguing that the garden was where Jesus was heard, which confirmed his priesthood after the order of Melchizedek. Mm-hmm. That's the theological point of the Garden of Gethsemane. Because in the book of Hebrews chapter 5, the Hebrew writer is arguing for the supremacy of the Melchizedekian order priesthood, which Jesus was a part of. And his priesthood was confirmed in that in the garden, when he prayed, he was heard. That's what the text says. And then Neil's verse says, although he was a son, he learned obedience through what he suffered. Now in that text, that suffering is not a suffering in Gethsemane. In Hebrews chapter 5, verse 8, that suffering is the death that he experienced, and all of the things that happened leading up to that death, in terms of the whipping, the crown of thorns, the walking of the cross, and the ultimate crucifixion. That's what he suffered, physical suffering, not necessarily in the garden. Although one could assume that he's talking about the garden, but it is clear that the garden was where he was, because right after verse 8 is verse 9 and 10, where it shows that this was connected to him being confirmed a priest. The garden is where and that's why I don't tend to always go for the argument about the humanity, because we immediately take this moment, and I do think it's a Christological moment where we can look at the humanity, but there is very stronger significance to the fact that what the Hebrew writer stresses is that he was heard in the garden. That he was heard, and that confirms his priesthood after the order of Melchizedek. And the reason why that's important is because, in terms of your text of surrender, the fact that he's heard and that he's a priest means that he can now go and offer a sacrifice. It just so happens that he is also the sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
So his priesthood was confirmed in the garden, and after the garden, you are not watching the death of anyone. You are watching a priest make a sacrifice on an altar. That's the surrender. It's a different text, right? Totally different. Once you see it that way, his death, everything that you're about to see on that cross, he's going to suffer. Don't get me wrong. He's going to suffer. But everything he's experiencing on that cross is a priest offering an offering. That's why you have to celebrate when you understand what's happening on that cross. Because he is suffering while also doing priestly duties. Oh, Jesus, that's good. And the reason why that's good is because as Christians, our job is to suffer while offering our sacrifice. And that's why surrender must be the disposition. Anyway, that it turns it forward facing, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's very quickly talk about the components of a enthralling sermon. What do you think should be the components of a captivating sermon?
Well, I literally took heed to the last time we talked about celebratory celebration in the closing. And there's another guy I heard that from. I don't know, the name Frank Edwards comes to me. It may be the wrong name, but I heard him mention celebration in the preaching and especially in the closing. And so I tried to include some of that in the last sermon I preached, and there was definitely a clear difference, amplification in the response that was visible, even among the non-believer that was there. I thought that was interesting.
And the celebration terminology is strictly within the Black church culture.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is why it's effective in the Black church. And it's the way that it was described for me was the close and the celebration at the end is the point where the church, you and God all come together in one big moment of complete understanding of the pivotal point of a text, and therefore you are all unitedly in this celebration over what has been made known and revealed. That's what that celebration moment is. It is a culmination of the effort and work that the minister has done and the effort and work that the congregation does in order to follow that minister to that place where the mystery, that which was concealed is revealed and made known, and we're all going to celebrate it. Now, the question becomes, how do I get to that celebration? How do I get there?
I'm learning, you thread the sermon with the gospel.
Putting that, and I think it is a challenge to make the message gospel oriented. And I would say it this way: the gospel is not the gravy or the sauce. The gospel has to be the meat and potatoes and vegetables of the meal. The sauce becomes how it pertains to and relates to the lives of us today, or how does it impact the lives of us today? That's the sauce.
Yeah, that's gold.
I'll give you an example of what this looks like. As we look at John 4, most people
Dante, how are you doing?
Good.
Most people celebrate, their celebration moment is the woman who when he meets the woman at the well. I'll go to the King James so that it'd be easier to read. Most people will celebrate that the woman ran back into town and told everybody in town, come see a man who told me all about myself. Right?
Right.
That would for most people be the gravy. That would be their high point. Where am I looking at?
John 4.
Yeah, verse 429. Come see a man which told me all the things that ever I did. Is not this the Christ? So let's build out a sermon. Let's build one out today. What would be the close? What's going to be our close? Let's build it backwards. What's going to be our close for this?
This is the Christ.
Or you see people make a sermon, and again, we're using the whole story of the woman at the well. Most people say that, you've heard sermons, come see a man. Let's write it this way. And again, we're just playing around with it. We're spitballing. Let's take verse 28 as the high point. And let's take first verse 28, and we're going to call the message. Is Dante there? I want to make sure Dante is still here before we.
Yeah, I'm still here, but I'm about to pull out, but I'm still here. I ain't going nowhere. I got an appointment to get to.
Okay.
I'm still here. I'm still listening.
Look at verse 27. I'm sorry, verse 28. Instead of doing it out of verse 29, come see a man which told me all the things that ever I did. Is not this the Christ? Let's build it out of verse 28. And here's the title. We're going to title this. I'm showing you my page so we can see it together. Something to leave your water pots for. Something to leave your water pots for. And therefore the sermon would be built on the idea of what could make a person leave their water pots behind. And then I would look up significance of water pots in first century Palestine in the days of Jesus. And what I'm going to find is that I'm going to build this sermon off of the significance of water pots. In the first century Judea and Galilee, stone water pots were essential to Jewish daily life, religious. So let's do Palestine in the days of Jesus. Significance of water pots in the first century. In first century Palestine, where's that? The woman at the well takes place, if I'm not mistaken, is in
Samaria.
So let's go about the significance of first century water pots in first century Samaria in the days of Jesus. Right? In the first century, water pots in Samaria served as vital tools for daily survival and profile spiritual symbols and teaching. I could go further and go and just to build it off of this, I would go, was it customary for first century Samaritans to leave water pots behind at wells? And you will find, like you see right here, that it was not a normal custom. We're building the sermon now. We're building the sermon to the high point. What the whole theme is something to leave your water pots for. What could make a person leave their water pots behind? Listen, this is already forward facing. Do you see that? It's already forward facing. It's already headed to the gospel. And instead of taking the premise, because if I take it from the premise, it doesn't mean that always. If I take it from the premise that's already been used of come see a man, or take it from the premise of is not this the Christ, which has already been used, I'm going to probably tell a narrative sermon. Jesus met a woman at the well, and they begin to dialogue, right. But if I take it from the standpoint of why would nobody would leave their water pot, right? So I will write down, it was not normal in that day to leave a water pot, and I can make this assumption without even looking it up, as a water pot was a person's connection to water, which was an essential part of living. And I can shape that up however I want to. Right now, we're just creating some simple notes. And again, from even from that, so what we're doing is we're building out. Here's the big idea. That big idea will get me, if you create the big idea correctly, you should be able to create a big idea that can get you to your close. It'll have enough push to get you there. It'll have enough push to get you there. And so from my introduction, I'm going to build the sermon backwards almost and not give everything away. And again, if I go with the premise of come see a man or is not this the Christ, I'm going to be more narrative, which means I'm basically going to give away most of the stuff at the beginning. But we're trying to get people to a celebration, and this is not a planned I wish I'm hoping we record. Sermonically, this is not a planned. How can I say it? Sermonically, this should be a surprise party. The celebration should be a surprise party. In other words, you don't want to let people know everything. Otherwise, you'll spoil the surprise. And therefore, the celebration is ruined. We want people to walk with us and they kind of know, but they don't know. So my introduction is now not going to be able to give a direct narrative, is it? My introduction can't give a direct narrative. In other words, I'm not going to be able to go, the woman in this text is from Samaria. She meets Jesus at a well, and Jesus tells her all about her life. Y'all know what that's like for somebody to tell you about your life. And then everything is more, your sermon becomes more life lesson, more anecdotal, more instead of it becoming complex, where people are willing to listen to your rap. What can make a person leave their water pots behind in first century Palestine? That might not have any significance to anyone in this room this morning, but water pots were very important in the first century. They played a critical role. I could preach that blindfolded. I could preach that message blindfolded and get somebody to the cross on that one. Something happened to that. So in the message, what you're trying to explore then is that something happened to this woman that made her leave what was considered in that day essential for something more crucial. Again, I'm writing it just kind of off the cuff. But again, remember this idea is that I wrote down the idea of essential, but water pots in that day were seen as life. And it was not a normal custom. That's what I'm reading verbatim. It was not a normal custom in the first century. Water jars were valuable, heavy, essential daily household items. It would have been unheard of for a person in that time to not have a water pot or to leave their water pot behind. It would have been a tragedy in their culture. So what would make a person leave something like that behind, something valuable? Now, there are several things that you could think of. So then, this, I would say that the introduction gives us a strong proposition to build on. If the big idea is strong enough, the introduction will give us a strong proposition to build on. And what I'm building towards is this part here, which is the question that has to be figured out. Now, we're almost out of time. Now, I don't want to come to the assumption that everybody's coming to, which is, and that's what you're going to have to turn here to make it work. What does she leave it for in your mind? What does she leave her water pot for? This is crazy. Matter of fact, I'm going to put something here for you. Is that she came to that well for water. So why did she came to the well for water, so why did she leave without her water pot? And again, what I'm doing in that, you could say that the introduction is also the body, the introduction in the body. I'm asking several inquisitive questions. I would almost call
that's a good sermon perspective. That's a good lesson right there, bro.
I would almost call them successive inquisitive questions that I'm going to continue to hit the church with, and that's how that text, that's how the body of my text is going to be built. It's not built narratively. Now, sometimes, again, remember, you want to have all these styles in your tool belt. So sometimes you're not going to do this particular style. We're going to try to go through as many styles as we can to broaden your tool belt that are meant for homiletical preaching. It's not just one style. We're going to look at all of the homiletical options. But to me, this is how my brain would work this out. And I would ask several inquisitive questions. Why did she came there? She came to the well for water. So why did she leave without her water pot? She left without getting what she came for. So what did she get that made the difference? And again, I don't have to give the answer away. Well, let me write it down. I have to give the answer in a way that will cause celebration. Again, this message is already fully written. Right? This message for the most part is fully written. The other question. The other question that I would ask is out of verse 11. The woman saith unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. That's verse 11. So then I'm just going to look up real quick, what does it mean in John 4:11 that he had nothing to draw with? And what I'll find is that it just means that Jesus lacks a bucket and a rope to pull water up from the deep well. The reason why I'm going to use that in here is because if I share this tab, right, I'm looking for things to ask questions about. Here's the next question I'm going to ask. And the question is going to be, she left with water, or I would put that it's clear that she left with water from a person who did not have the tools to fill her bucket. So how did she get a full, how did she get full without Jesus having a means to draw water? Something like that. Do you hear what I'm saying there? That would be my question. My question is an equivocal question based on verse 11, because her query is, after he says that I'm giving you living water, her statement, because she doesn't understand it, is, well, how are you going to give me water? And you came to this place without any means or reasoning to be able to draw that out. Okay. That leads you to the celebration of where you want to be at. All right. Let's close. Neil.
Yes, sir.
So that's kind of the prescription there. Dante had to leave. We'll finish. But you would just build it that way. You're building towards the celebration. And again, once you have a big idea and the celebration point, it's kind of easy to build towards it.
Yes, sir.
This is all right. Matthew. I will send the next scripture because Dante's not on the call. I already know what it is.
Or what is it?
It will be oops.
Huh. Something to leave your water pots for.
I think we're going to KJV, Matthew 27. It's easier for me to actually do this kind of stuff than to actually write my own messages, man.
Yeah, well, I can see why. I can see it. I can taste it. Something to leave your water pots for.
Don't go. Well, you go ahead and preach it. I don't care. Jesus is mine.
It's not going to be the same.
It don't make no difference to me.
I'm just saying.
This is a place for you to be able to workshop and take things and use them in real time. So if they help you, that is amazing. Just make sure to send me a video of it. That way I can show everybody.
Can you send me that page with the questions? I didn't get all of them. All right, you prefer I do it myself. Go ahead.
No, why would I do that? I'm making sure that I put the text on there so that I can send it to you. I have no problem with sending you this. Again, this is all workshop stuff, man. I'm not doing this to. That's what y'all are in the class for. So y'all can
Boom
get
shakalaka.
It was John 4, 7 through John 4, 7 through. That's a long text. Through 29, 7 through 29. Yep, I will send that to you. 4, 7 through 29. Okay. And then you asked me something else too, though, didn't you? Oh, yeah. Then the text for this next week is out of Matthew 27. Verse 46. Next assignment.
Okay.
Is Matthew 27, verse 46. Cool.
All right. Before we go,
what's going on?
Can you look at a passage with me and just briefly give some suggestions on implementing this style of topical sermon?
Sure.
Luke 14, 7 to 11.
Luke 14. Seven through 11.
Yeah.
Forth a parable to those which were bidden, when he marked how they chose out the chief rooms, saying unto them, when thou art bidden of a man to a wedding, Sit not down in the highest room, lest a more honorable man than thou be bidden of him. And he that bade thee and him come and say to you, give this man place, and thou begin with shame to take the lowest room. But when thou art bidden, go and sit down in the lowest room, that when he that bade thee cometh, he may say unto you, friend, go up higher. Then shalt thou have worship in the presence of them that sit at meat with thee. For whosoever exalteth himself shall be abased, and he that humbleth himself shall be exalted. What are your initial thoughts?
Well, we use that statement all the time. The way up goes down, and the way up is down. Let God exalt you. Take the low road. Boom, boom, boom. As if to suggest, now I'm moving, that, taking the best seat really could be an answer for some of the deeper challenges, right? But we're looking for validation, insecurity, that kind of stuff.
That's what you are going to preach out here?
Well, I'm looking at it. It's either that or leaving your something to leave your water pots for. Yeah. I like the idea of even the title, like some of the titles I've been using clearly express what the content that will follow. And you reinforce that again today. The celebration should be a surprise. So the title should not expose the content.
What was your title going to be?
What the best seat cannot fix, to show that they were going after some things, right? The best seat can answer insecurity and pride, what you achieve, recognition, status, some of the things that we chase after in life.
Okay. So I'm on Google right now, and I'm sharing my page, etymology, morphology, this kind of, Luke 14. Oh, I put in the wrong thing. Luke 14, 7 through 11, right?
Yeah. Recognition, perhaps, because this is coming off of our.
Go ahead.
This is coming off of our time with Matthew 6, and specifically verse 1, which gives which windows the text we looked at in verse 13, I think. Verse 1, yeah, we looked at verse 1 through 13. And I couldn't get over that, right? How do we take our private intimacy with God, move it to public without performance to be seen and heard? That impressed. A matter of fact, I've been talking to the guys in worship about that for a minute or two prior to service recently. Right? How do you make intimacy public without a performance to be seen? How do you do that? That's really challenging. Because whether we realize it or not, we are doing it. We can be doing it for recognition, for publicity. If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And so since I've been preaching through Luke 14 and I'm learning, I ought to be able to preach from Luke 14 at least for another few months and not duplicate anything.
So here's my question. My first question is this. My first question would be, and I'll share this tab from, we're doing Luke 14, 7 through 11.
Right.
Title would be It's Time to Go Higher. What is the process divinity has prescribed to move? And let me write this first, because a question that's coming that I have about this text, as I read it, just a question that I have. There's two questions that I have, basically. The first one, what is the banquet in reference to? Because who wants to go in order for me to see the value of shifting to a higher dimension, I need to know the value of that higher dimension, which means understanding exactly what the banquet represents. Or what did the chief seat signify in that culture? These are the questions that I'm just asking right off the bat. Significantly, what does the lower seat signify? And the only reason I'm asking that is because in this text, we are not quite told. It's a parable, that's clear. But what does the parable represent? What is the banquet? And again, that's very fundamental. Is this text really about humility? Well, and again, what he says is, he put forth a parable to those which were bidden. So I'm asking what was he at where he made this statement? What was he doing? Because he obviously, wherever he is, he noticed how they chose out chief. Oh, it doesn't say seats. It says chief rooms. Let's see. The KJV says chose out chief rooms. The ESV says they chose the places of honor. Where was that? In other words, I want to move higher, but I need to understand. Give me a second because I'm trying to work out what the pivotal question would be. This is just my process of how I'll be asking questions that I would ask to figure out my questions. What is the process divinity has prescribed to move higher? And again, what is higher in this parable? What is higher? So then that's my question. In Luke 14, verse what's the verse? I guess the verse would be verse 8, maybe. What in Luke 14, what is higher in the parable? Or what does higher mean in the parable? Again, I don't understand that. And because I don't understand it, receiving honor and promotion from someone else rather than demanding, again, all they're doing right now is just telling me what that is. Which doesn't do anything for me. What I'm really interested in is 10, where it says, friend, go up higher. That's all I would read. I wouldn't read nothing else. Luke 14:10, I would only read this part of it. Friend, go up higher. So then I'm going to change that to, in Luke 14:10, what does higher mean in the parable? Is it a place or state or position? I don't think it's about just humility. It's about position shifting. Okay, so then my tab says the term higher is best understood as a combination of position and status rather than a physical place. So I think that my question would be then, why would okay, let me do that differently, Neil. I'm sorry. I'm just working through it. I'm gonna put after that, I'm gonna type in, give me the histography. Because again, it might seem like this makes sense to people, but it doesn't. A literal physical seat or greater honor. Okay. So the position is a place. In the parable, what would that position be then? It's not the parable is giving a higher regard, but we have to identify what is being talked about here. In the parable, the position is a physical seat of greater honor. I'm gonna just put it on your mind that that's got to be a theological implication. Jesus is dining at home of a prominent Pharisee on the Sabbath. The trichylium, I already know what the trichylium is. Formal meals in the Roman world would take place around a U-shaped table. Guests reclined on pillows and couches rather than sitting in chairs. The hierarchy of seating, this is the point. Status was highly visible and strictly defined. The host sat at the center of the middle table. The places immediately to the right and left of the host were the seats of honor, reserved for those most distinguished guests. So I would say, watch the. Oh man, this would be good. So what I'm looking at that strikes me as significant on this page is that it says that the places immediately right and left of the hosts were the seats of honor, reserved for the most distinguished guests. The further away from the hosts, the lower the status.
So it was about recognition?
Say that again?
It was about recognition?
Nah, it's about proximity. It's about the proximity of perception. They believe that the closer that a person was to the person at the center, the closer I was meant that I had closer relationship. And
You froze. You froze.
Me.
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, you're back.
And I would write that down. I would write that down as relationship is not defined by proximity to God.
Whoa. Well, isn't that what he's saying? Isn't that what the explanation suggests, that proximity is synonymous with status? Hello? Okay, I'll wait on you. Can't hear you yet. Yeah.
Hey, I'm video calling.
Oh, okay.
You should be able to click on your phone to do video.
I'm there. I'm looking at myself now. Hello? What happened? The video is gone. Okay. Show me, hide me, decline. Okay, can you see me? I can't see you yet. Okay, hide me. Okay, I can see you now. Can you see me? Well, it says hide me, so I'm hidden. What can I say? This is a new thing. Whoa, call switch to voice. Okay.
Yeah, go back to highs. I guess figure.
Oh, Lord Jesus, Jesus, Jesus.
There you go.
All right, right. It's in how I respond. Okay.
So for me, the interesting thing that I was looking at